Good morning. Welcome to All Out Politics. 2 hours of news, debate and opinion from the heart of Westminster. Racial discrimination in the British criminal justice system could be worse than in the United States. That is the conclusion of a highly critical report that will be delivered in the next hour. The MP David Lammy says the bias is so bad, prosecutions against some black and minority ethnic suspects should be dropped or deferred. The Labour MP's report was written at the request of the Prime Minister, and we'll bring you his speech on his findings later on this hour. Adele Robinson has more details.
Nah, I will definitely not be treated fairly.
I think that it's unfair how we get seen as people.
Getting arrested over no reason.
Words of distrust, views on the criminal justice system.
It's hard to gain trust in an organisation that you don't think has changed from when I was a kid 20 years ago.
Opinions in Hackney, backing up a landmark report into the treatment of ethnic minorities within the justice system. MP David Lammy's review calls for a radical overhaul of the way offenders are dealt with.
I have found that there is bias in the system and there is overt discrimination in parts of the criminal justice system. But it is also important to say that many of these issues begin long before the criminal justice system. They begin in homes, and broken homes particularly.
Keep them in there, guys. 10 passes. Let's do 10 passes. Let's go.
Bobby knows firsthand. He spent 8 years in prison. He now runs community football training and supports the report's recommendation of deferred prosecutions, where rehabilitation is offered instead.
But sometimes it's just a one-off mistake, hanging with the wrong people at the wrong time, being in the wrong place, and that can change your whole life. So sometimes looking at things in that way, where you defer that decision, come back another time, see how they react after 6 weeks to however time the length period, and then go again.
The review also highlights disproportionate numbers in the system. Figures show black, Asian and minority ethnic men and women make up just 14% of the population. But behind bars, they actually account for 25% of prisoners. If the numbers were proportionate to the population, there'd be 9,000 fewer people of ethnic minority in jail, the equivalent of 12 average-sized prisons. For drug offences, people from ethnic minorities are also significantly more likely to be imprisoned.
Very large numbers of British people from our black and ethnic minority communities lack confidence in the criminal justice system. No minister, no government of any political colour can be happy with that state of affairs. We need to address that problem. David Lammy's recommendations offer a possible route for doing some of that, and we'll be responding in detail to every item of his report.
Another major concern is the rise in youth offending among minorities. Lawyer Robert Brown says the report's revelations should be a wake-up call.
The confidence, the public confidence, and particularly confidence amongst black communities within the criminal justice system is now very low, maybe at an all-time low. And we've got to go back 18 years to the Macpherson report, which came out of the horrible Stephen Lawrence case. And what I'm seeing now is that what was wrong with the criminal justice system at the time of the Lawrence case is what's wrong with the criminal justice system now.
The causes and the proposed solutions are complex, but the aim is greater equality and fairness for this generation and the next. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
Well, live coverage of David Lammy's speech coming up. With me now is Leroy Logan, who's a former superintendent in the Metropolitan Police and chair of the Black Police Association Charitable Trust. Welcome to you indeed. The statistics are shocking. Where do you think the problem is?
Well, I think it's a lot the unconscious bias that various people in the justice system, from the executive end, which is policing, to how the courts interpret cases, and of course how that people are convicted, because you're twice as likely to be charged and kept in custody at a police station, and you're more than likely to get a larger sentence than your white counterpart.
Is there any suggestion that because of social conditions, if you like, maybe disproportionately young black boys might find themselves getting into trouble with the law?
Yeah, well, we've shown statistically that certain deprived areas get more heavy-handed policing. Policing in Hampstead is totally different to policing in Hackney. It shouldn't be any different, but you tend to see that
if there's more likely to be civil disorder, I suppose you'd expect.
Not necessarily. That's sometimes the assumptions that are made. But you know, these issues have been going on for generations. And so if you find that from the sus law in the 70s, when I was a youngster growing up in Islington, that's quite a leafy area, quite well to do. I used to get stopped and searched under the sus law, and I know a lot of my peers and even my relatives had to leave the country because they knew they would get convicted under the sus law, and it's nothing like it's as accountable it is today. And even with the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, which improved the sus law and repealed it, fortunately, you still see the disproportionate number of people being stopped. You're 6 to 7 times more likely to be stopped if you're black than you're white. And then there's more chances of you being involved, being tasered or having some sort of violent encounter with an officer. So these sort of things have been highlighted, as shown in the video, from the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. But the important thing is for the government to own this and to show the leadership. And I would like to think the independent oversight to ensure that these recommendations are fully implemented.
I mean, we know, for example, as you say, on Stop and Search, that the government has revisited this repeatedly. What more, in practical terms, could they do?
Well, as I said, independent oversight is really important because when the Stephen Lawrence recommendations and the Stephen Lawrence steering groups was chaired by the Home Secretary, he made sure that each aspect of those recommendations were fully implemented. But as time went on, and that steering group was disbanded, and it was left to the police to write their own homework, or in the CPS, you know, things slipped. But I must give credit to the CPS because they picked up on a lot of things from the Lawrence inquiry, and that's why now, with the Lammy review...
Which is, of course, when the judge said that there was institutional racism in the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah, and the CPS really picked up on this, similar to the police, but I think the CPS have really carried it forward. That's why even the Lammy report is saying that the CPS are showing a lot more objectivity. But what we need to see as well is representation in the courts, you know, more black judges, more black magistrates, to ensure that you have that real sort of cultural intelligence and cultural affinity.
Because, I mean, what we're also seeing, I think, in Ms. Lammy's report, is that when it comes to sentencing for the same category of crime, you're more likely to get a tougher sentence or a custodial sentence if you're black.
Yeah. Well, it's not just unconscious bias or even institutional racism. Sometimes young people from black and minority ethnic backgrounds tend to not trust the system. So they'll say nothing in an interview, and then they'll get charged and kept in, and they go to court and they'll plead not guilty. And we had a case just in the court, literally, last week, where, because I'm doing an anti-gang project, and that person, unfortunately, pleaded guilty at the last minute. So they're bound to get a tougher sentence because they don't trust the system. And
not getting the correct legal advice, if you like.
There's a bit of that as well. And, you know, we've got to make sure that we've got a reflective police service, a reflective justice system, to make sure that you've got a cultural intelligence and cultural competence with the constituent group of a reflective community. And I would like to hope that these recommendations are not going to decorate people's shelves as they have in the past, and they're really going to be implemented.
Well, that really was
fully.
my final question, because, you know, this has affected you really all your life, both as a policeman and personally, and I just wonder whether you do think, in any sense, over that period, we have got better about this.
Oh, yeah, I think we're in the right direction, but, you know, because there's a lot more accountability and transparency. But we're still getting certain issues that's still impacting the community around how people, even on the DNA database, 80% of the DNA database are black and minority ethnic people. So, you know, and even the gangs matrix, which is around offender risk, disproportionately number of people on that are black, and it's based on intelligence. They have to think, well, actually, should they be there in the first place? So all of these things need to be reviewed to get the reform, so you've got a modern police service, a more professional police service, a more modern justice system.
Leroy Logan, thank you very much indeed. At least 14 people have